Season 2 kicks off with a grand tour of our beloved village, starting with a super warm welcome from Lasty and Beazle, who are all set to be our awesome tour guides. As we stroll along, Lasty chats about her role in diplomacy, while Beazle takes the lead in showing us around the beautiful scenery of the village. Just a little ways ahead, we are instantly greeted by the village's massive, sprawling cornfields that seem to go on forever. But it is not just corn. We also spot Senna, our favorite beast girl, proudly showing off the super fresh tomatoes they just harvested. Moving over to the other side, the high elves are looking incredibly busy harvesting the beautifully golden, ripe rice fields. Next up, we run into Donovan, the elder dwarf, who happily explains that he is the mastermind behind brewing all the amazing alcohol in the village. Over in another corner, we see Yar, the mountain elf, who is famous around here for her incredible skills in crafting all sorts of handmade goods. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, things get surprisingly serious as Lou, Tia, and Ria have an intense discussion on how to make the absolute best first impression on their guests. And finally, our main man, Hiroku, makes his grand entrance, welcoming us to Great Tree Village with his signature, heartwarming hospitality. This is the absolute dream place he managed to build completely from scratch alongside all his wonderful new friends. As time goes by, you can really feel how the village is getting livelier and bursting with more life every single day. Looking at all this incredible progress, Hiroku cannot help but look back on his early struggles of farming totally alone, leading up to now, where he has so many villagers looking out for each other. Because, completely out of nowhere, over 100 new villagers and refugees are planning to settle down right here. Realizing that the current village is hitting its limit, Hiroku and Lu make the big decision to start building an entirely new settlement. All the villagers immediately kick into high gear, doing everything from chopping down trees to busily practicing for the upcoming welcome ceremony. Right in the middle of the crazy harvest season, and drops by with some delicious vegetable lunches for Hiroku, Lu, and Tia to boost their morale. She does this to make sure they have plenty of energy to tackle the massive amount of work waiting for them. But on the flip side, over at the village office, the administrative staff are practically fainting at the sight of the ever-growing mountains of paperwork. These new recruits initially thought their jobs would be a total breeze, but the tasks piling up are actually incredibly overwhelming. Thankfully, with that extra helping hand, all the complicated administrative chaos is finally sorted out perfectly. To wrap up the day, Grandmaria returns from her patrol and reports that the area around the village is completely safe, giving everyone some much-needed peace of mind. Hiroku and Lu head out to explore the forest, searching for the perfect spot to build the new village. Hiroku instantly falls in love with a wide-open clearing that feels just right to start everything. While gazing at a giant tree in the distance, they chat a bit about preparing supplies, even though Hiroku feels the location is not really that far from the main village. Using a map, they pinpoint a strategic spot downstream to be the center of the village. However, Lu intentionally picks a location slightly further away from the water's edge for a very specific reason. It turns out, Lu wants to play it safe just in case there is ever a rebellion in the future. Even though Hiroku is a bit puzzled by that worry, he totally respects Lu's careful planning. To mark the territory, they use a super unique tree with a curved, gate-like trunk as the official symbol that they have arrived at the future village site. Wasting absolutely no time, the road project begins, but Ria and the other workers quickly hit a snag because the wood in this forest is so ridiculously hard that it is actually ruining their axes. We get this hilarious original clip of Hiroku chopping down trees while randomly shouting out names of noodles. Thanks to Hiroku stepping in, the road access is finally blown wide open. Not only that, but he also builds a neat little wooden bridge over the river to make moving building materials so much easier. Lu is actually a bit confused as to why the bridge is made so small. Hiroku cleverly explains that he did it on purpose, so that giant monsters cannot use it to cross into the village. With the access route all sorted, the work shifts into high gear with land clearing, setting up an irrigation system, digging a reservoir, and even building a wood workshop to support the basic facilities of the new village. Rie is completely blown away seeing Hiroku work that fast all by himself, since they now have a massive stockpile of wood. Rie insists that Hiroku takes a break while the rest of the crew continues the construction, but instead of just chilling out, Hiroku gets totally absorbed in carving a wooden statue as a monument for Zabuton, after he spots a tiny spider resting on a tree stump. Shortly after, Lu shows up carrying their baby and playfully teases Hiroku about his inability to just sit still. Finally, our hardworking Nea actually sits down to enjoy a proper break with his family. Meanwhile, Ria and her team are super busy assembling the house frames. The wooden materials Hiroku prepped earlier make the whole building process run so much more efficiently. Watching this awesome teamwork, Hiroku gets a bit nostalgic about the old days when he had to build his first hut completely alone without any nails. Now, he feels incredibly blessed to have such reliable companions. Lu also joins in on the nostalgia trip, recalling how tough it was when they had to lug heavy logs on by themselves, whereas now, the area is already filling up with neat rows of brand new houses. The construction speed goes through the roof thanks to some super handy construction magic. Those house frames literally pop up instantly the moment the activation spell is chanted. While waiting for the finishing touches, and the maids start passing out warm, delicious soup to all the workers. Hiroku also puts up a sign banning the throwing of wood just to make sure there are no workplace accidents. Now, 5 houses are standing tall, even though they have no clue who is going to live in them yet. Suddenly, an angel swoops in with an urgent message that Drime's group is almost here. The angel reports that Drime is bringing along the prospective new villagers. Moments later, a massive green dragon makes a super rough landing, kicking up a huge cloud of dust everywhere. As soon as he lands and shifts into his human form, Drime immediately apologizes for rushing in. He admits he actually had to race his own messenger wyvern just to get there faster. Without missing a beat, Drime introduces the group of Minotaurs who want to settle down. Hiroku is honestly a bit surprised because they look way more like heavily muscled humans than traditional cowage-eated monsters. Hiroku steps up to greet the Minotaur leader, who is absolutely towering. The leader explains that they were chased out of their original village and have been wandering aimlessly for a really long time. Since the sun is already starting to set, Hiroku suggests they wrap up the chat and immediately start preparing a massive feast to welcome their brand new villagers. Hiroku does a quick headcount of the newly arrived group, and it turns out there are exactly 72 Minotaurs officially joining the village. While serving up some warm porridge to welcome them, Hiroku has a brief moment of panic, wondering if there are any specific foods these bullfolk are not allowed to eat. Luckily, Dogga quickly jumps in to help out, since our favorite lizardman actually has experience living alongside the Minotaur race in his old village. Thanks to Dogga chatting them up, the food situation goes off without a hitch. However, the peace does not last long because a brand new problem pops up regarding the size of their living quarters. Hiroku suddenly realizes that the wooden houses he prepared are way too tiny, making the Minotaurs look incredibly cramped when they try to squeeze inside. As a result, with the guest accommodations already bursting at the seams, Hiroku and Frorum have to think fast on their feet about how to house all these newcomers. Right in the middle of that chaos, Frorum arrives with a message from her dad, followed closely by Beazle, who looks totally drained from just using teleportation magic. Beazle was forced to use magic because the situation suddenly turned critical, so Frorum has to quickly help her exhausted father so he can get some much-needed rest. Before they can even finish dealing with the Minotaurs, a group of centaurs suddenly arrives at the village. Their leader, Gluwald, marches straight into the hall to meet Hiroku. Gluwald then introduces herself as the centaur representative to Hiroku, but she speaks with a pretty high and mighty tone and comes off as quite arrogant. That snobby attitude comes from her believing she holds a really high status, but since Hiroku is totally clueless about noble etiquette, he just lets Frorum step up to handle her. Frorum immediately starts interrogating Gluwald because she senses that these centaurs are actually here seeking refuge, not to boss people around. Even though Gluwald keeps yelling, Frorim does not flinch at all and keeps a sweet smile while firmly reminding her that this land definitely does not belong to the centaurs. The vibe instantly gets super tense when Frorim finally gives her official introduction as Beezel's daughter, proving her status is way higher than Gluwald's. We then get this amazing raw clip of Gluwald completely groveling on the floor, begging for forgiveness. Once the tension clears up, Frorim asks for permission to oversee the centaur group while reassuring Heroku that her family back home is still perfectly safe despite the ongoing war. Meanwhile, her co-workers back at the village office are actually panicking, terrified that Frorim will not come back to help them tackle the monstrous piles of paperwork. The house size issue strikes again because the centaurs have such massive bodies, and even loose shrinking magic cannot do much to save the day this time, especially after Gluwald reports that there are a total of 104 centaurs. This gives Heroku a massive headache as he tries to figure out the village capacity, which is already maxed out. Ultimately, Heroku considers borrowing some space in Elamia's dungeon, feeling pretty guilty that the houses he built turned out to be way too small for them. As if dealing with the Minotaurs and Centaurs was not enough, another totally unexpected group suddenly shows up. This time, a mysterious bunch of green-haired women come to meet Heroku, Lu, and Tia. Heroku and the gang can only stare at them, completely bubbling with curiosity about who they are. It turns out, this group of women made it there because Elamia kindly guided them while they were wandering through the dense forest. The thing is, this group was walking incredibly slowly, so the Lamias took the initiative to help them reach the village a bit faster. But the weird part is, when someone tries to talk to them, they just stand there like statues. Heroku is so confused, wondering if they are just super nervous or naturally the silent type. Instead of answering, one of them just keeps staring blankly at Heroku without uttering a single word. But right in the middle of that awkward silence, the mouth on the wooden stump they are carrying suddenly starts twitching. Who would have guessed? That wooden stump can actually talk, and it introduces itself as Ig, the representative of the group. As it turns out, they are the Nyonyu Daphne race, tree spirits who can transform into plants. If they get hurt, they shrink down into a wooden stump, which is exactly what happened to Ig. In fact, if any trees in the forest are damaged by wild beasts, these spirits actually feel the pain and get injured too, all thanks to their deep spiritual connection with nature. Consequently, since their homeland was destroyed by humans, they decided to seek refuge here. As a warm welcome, Heroku immediately plans to prepare a huge spread of fresh fruits for them to eat. This happens right after the merchant Michael convinced them about the absolutely top-tier quality of the fruits thriving in Heroku's village. But fascinatingly, instead of asking for delicious food, they simply request to be placed in some fertile soil to help them heal up. And sure enough, cute little flowers instantly start blooming right out of Ig's wooden body the second she touches the soil. The view in the fields becomes super unique because they are all just standing there completely still. It turns out that for this race, nutrients from the soil, water, and sunshine are more than enough to survive. Meanwhile, Heroku just watches from a distance, trying his best to wrap his head around the habits of his incredibly chill new villagers. Even though Heroku offered them houses, they are actually way more comfortable sleeping out in the open. Heroku is pretty worried about the rain. But these tree spirits are totally adamant about staying outdoors. Using lots of reassuring gestures, Heroku keeps trying to coax them into at least taking shelter somewhere a bit more protected. Finally, when night falls, it is time to figure out sleeping arrangements, while the Minotaurs settle into the village buildings. The Nyonyu Daphne are perfectly happy just standing on relaxing in the middle of the fields. On the flip side, the Centaur group actually feels super cozy making the cow barn their new resting spot. Because of this whole situation, Heroku gets busy planning the construction of a massive new house. Hokuran even gets super pumped up to help out, so that all these new residents can have a proper place to live. She is so fired up that Hokuran literally slams her hands on the table, completely unable to contain her excitement to start this huge building project. Meanwhile, in another room, Frorim is having a serious talk with Gluwald, the centaur leader. It turns out Gluwald feels incredibly guilty about her rude behavior earlier, and wants to apologize. Oh face. After listening to Florum's explanation, Gluewald can only hang her head in shame, feeling absolutely terrible about how she treated the village chief. The thing is, Florum makes it crystal clear that Hiroko is the most powerful person around. Gluewald is even more shocked to learn that a high-ranking official like Florum's dad deeply respects Hiroko. That explanation instantly makes Gluewald recall Michael's stories about just how massive Hiroko's influence and power truly are. As a result, a panicked Hiroko quickly tries to calm Gluewald down and begs her to get back on her feet. Hiroko is standing under the giant tree when Tia lands, followed by Beazle bringing in a group of tall Minotaurs for introductions. Not just Minotaurs, there is also a group of centaurs and the Nunu Daphne girls. The cutest part is that one of the representatives is literally just a tiny tree stump with an adorable face. Everyone gathers inside the big hall under Lou and Anne's watchful eyes. Hiroko steps up to greet the representatives of each race and give them a warm welcome. At first, Hiroko is just chatting casually like he always does, but he suddenly stops when he notices one of the reps looking incredibly stiff and nervous. It turns out to be Gluewald, who completely catches him off guard by bowing so deeply that her head is practically glued to the floor right in front of him. Seeing Gluewald prostrate like that makes Hiroko feel super awkward, but out of nowhere, a little girl holds up a whiteboard, instructing him to act more dignified like a true leader. So Hiroko tries his best to put on a stern, authoritative act. He tells Gluewald to raise her head and declares that he expects great things from their hard work from now on. Hearing those commanding words, Gluewald's eyes absolutely sparkle with admiration. But of course, the second the formal stuff is over, Hiroko immediately drops the act and goes back to his usual friendly, laid-back self. While Dogger is already getting ready for his tasks, Mamu, the beastkin girl, gets totally spooked when a flower suddenly blooms right on top of that little tree stump rep's head. Mamu is so hyped and amazed by what just happened that she keeps bowing repeatedly to Hiroko as a sign of deep respect. With the introductions out of the way, Hiroko starts thinking about housing. Since these new villagers come in all different shapes and sizes, he has to plan the village layout super carefully so everyone feels at home. He picks out a few spots in the forest for the residential areas, dividing the territory so the new residents have plenty of space to live without feeling cramped. To clear a path through the dense forest, Hiroko calls in Hakuran and Lasti for help. The two of them immediately get ready to show off their true dragon power. Without wasting a single second, Hakuran and Lasti transform into their massive dragon forms, towering high right in front of Hiroko. Hiroko is left completely speechless watching them work. Now, if you look at the village map, there are two perfectly straight, parallel paths created purely from their devastating kicks. Construction kicks off right away with moving massive wooden logs. Hiroko teams up with the Minotaurs to build fences and set up the basic infrastructure for the village. While the dragons continue clearing out the rest of the forest, Flora and Anne take a quick break to visit Lou, who is resting while holding her baby, Alfred. During this little downtime, Anne shows off a bunch of super cute baby clothes options for little Alfred to wear. Over on the other side of the village, Zabuton's kids are busy weaving cloth, while Dogger and the Minotaurs start putting up tall buildings that perfectly fit their massive frames. Hiroko even steps in to check the interior of the Minotaur houses. He makes sure the chairs and tables are custom-built to giant proportions, so they can sit comfortably during meals. He even specially designs their beds with a gap at the headboard, just so the Minotaurs will not bump their horns while they are sleeping. Finally, for the centaurs, Hiroko builds a long hall equipped with sliding doors, making it super easy for them to go in and out despite having horse bodies. Over in the centaur village, their new routine is going smoothly. Hiroko even notices how quick they are to shut the wooden sliding doors of their stables whenever it rains, so the inside stays nice and dry. It is just busy back at the main house, where Lou is struggling a bit with a fussy baby. Luckily, and swoops in and offers to help cheer the little guy up, unexpectedly, and tries to make the baby laugh by pulling all sorts of hilarious faces. This secret little performance totally surprises Lou. Since it is her first time seeing this silly side of the usually strict head maid, this peaceful life rolls on until 1 month passes and snow begins to blanket the forest. All their hard work finally pays off with the creation of 3 brand new villages spread across strategic spot. As, with the physical construction done, Hiroku sits down with Ria, Hakuren, and Frorim to discuss naming the villages, instead of coming up with complicated names. Hiroku decides to just use numbers to keep things practical. Hearing this, Frorim instantly protests and begs him not to change the village names later on. She absolutely dreads the idea of having to rewrite all those administrative documents she worked so hard on. Once the naming is settled, it is time to figure out who will lead each village. During this serious chat, Hiroku actually cringes a bit imagining himself wearing a crown and being called something grand, like village king. Meanwhile, Mamu feels a little sad, thinking the Nyonyu Daphne were forgotten since they did not get their own village, but Hiroku quickly cheers them up, explaining that their race actually has a way more important job at every location. It turns out the Nyonyu Daphne are amazing at using telepathy for long-distance communication between villages, plus, on top of running the communication posts, they can even light up the village paths at night like living street lamps. A new problem pops up, because the Minotaurs and Centaurs are actually having a really hard time hunting in this brutal forest. This makes Hiroku realize that Kuro's wolf pack is seriously on a whole other level compared to normal creatures. The power gap is super obvious when you compare Kuro's pack, who hunt flawlessly, to the other races, who look completely overwhelmed even when fighting a simple forest rabbit. Since hunting is too tough for the newcomers, they pivot to farming the land in each village, but Hiroku and Mamu are left scratching their heads when the planted seeds just will not sprout. Until they finally realize there is a huge issue with the planting season. All this time, the main reason Hiroku could survive in this wild forest was the almighty farming tool gifted by God. This magical item holds insane power that makes all his work an absolute breeze. Seriously, he can till the soil, plant seeds, and even speed up the harvest time whenever he wants without ever worrying about extreme seasonal changes. But the catch to all this convenience is that only Hiroku can use the tool. As a result, he starts feeling overwhelmed because he has to manage fields that keep getting bigger and bigger every single day. Realizing he cannot do it all alone, Hiroku asks the residents of the new villages to start farming manually. Thankfully, Gordon, the Minotaur, has a ton of knowledge about cultivating land. While checking on the field's progress, Hiroku smiles as he has a laid-back chat with Gordon, who shares stories about farming back in his old village. Under Gordon's guidance, the Minotaurs start planting wheat that should be ready to harvest before summer. This is the exact moment Hiroku realizes he has been way too reliant on his magic tool. Seeing the hard work and teamwork of his villagers, Hiroku feels incredibly grateful to God. He gazes at the giant tree in Great Tree Village, feeling so much more at peace. As a token of gratitude, Hiroku builds a small shrine, complete with wooden statues he carved himself, to honor the creator god and the goddess of agriculture. Even though the statues look a bit unfamiliar to the villagers, they really appreciate Hiroku's work because the carvings are just so detailed and neat. While the Minotaurs focus on the fields, the Centaurs use their incredible running speed to set up a delivery service between the villages around the forest. The village keeps growing, especially when the merchant Michael Gorun brings in new livestock like horses. Hiroku really wants to experience horseback riding, but the black horse totally ignores him and refuses to cooperate. Seeing Hiroku looking so bummed out about being rejected by the horse, Gluold steps up and offers to let him ride her back just to make her master's wish come true. It turns out it is super fun to see the view from up high. Gluold is thrilled to be useful, and Hiroku genuinely enjoys the moment riding on the centaur's back. Holding onto Gluold's shoulders so he does not fall, Hiroku is amazed by how incredibly stable the centaur's running speed is, even while dashing across the vast grassy plains. Hiroku even screams in excitement because he finally gets to experience riding something that runs that fast for the very first time. But a few days later, The black horse unexpectedly walks up and finally lets Hiroko climb onto its back. Little did he know, Ria was watching this whole thing closely from behind a building. Ria, seeing her master successfully riding a real horse, immediately bursts into tears. She is heartbroken, feeling like her spot as Hiroku's favorite ride is being replaced. That morning, Hiroku is totally caught off guard when Ria suddenly offers him a piggyback ride. Her excuse is simple. She thinks riding an unfamiliar horse is way too dangerous. So she would feel much better if he just rode on her back instead. Instead of giving up, Ria keeps insisting on being his horse replacement, which leaves Hiroko scrambling to calm things down before the situation gets any more awkward. To keep things fair, Hiroko finally comes up with a solution to take turns so everyone gets a chance, while they are busy negotiating. You can spot a purple slime just casually sliding over a wooden cart. Not too far away, Mamu is also seen checking in on a uniquely shaped tree spirit right in the middle of the sprawling fields. Since the village vibe is so bright and sunny that day, Mamu hangs out with the tree spirit, just taking in the view of the neatly cultivated farmland. Meanwhile, Hiroko is busy teaching the centaurs the proper way to till the soil, so they can get the absolute best results from their harvest. After finishing up his farm duties, Hiroko takes a relaxing stroll with Lou, who is carrying little Alfred. They both agree that the village's development has been going incredibly smoothly so far. As they walk past the bustling crowds of villagers, Hiroko and Lou occasionally stop to greet and share warm interactions with the locals. But beneath all that peace, Hiroko cannot help but worry about the village's future if something were to suddenly happen to him. Lou just gives a soft smile. Knowing her husband tends to overthink things, according to Lou, it is probably going to take quite a while before Hiroko can truly live a laid-back life, considering his responsibilities as the village chief are still massive. Right in the middle of having fun playing with Alfred, Hiroko suddenly realizes the little guy needs a diaper change as soon as possible because he is starting to get fussy. Even though the village is looking more beautiful than ever, one thing keeps bugging Hiroko. The female population in Great Tree Village vastly outnumbers the men. This massive gender imbalance makes Hiroko a bit anxious about the village's future, so he starts racking his brain trying to figure out a solution. Hiroko decides to ask Gluwald about the number of men in her race. At first, Gluwald thinks he wants to draft them into a military force. But she then explains that centaurs usually only marry within their own species. Hearing that, Hiroko panics and quickly clears things up so she does not get the wrong idea, while the village's infrastructure construction just keeps rolling along in the background. After clearing up the initial misunderstanding, Gluwald finally reveals that all the males in the centaur tribe are currently just children because the adults went off to fight in a war. Even though Gluwald just said interspecies marriage is usually difficult, she suddenly blushes bright red and offers herself to be Hiroko's partner. That sudden proposal sends Hiroko into full panic mode, and he quickly turns her down. He really just wanted to learn about centaur marriage traditions, not go hunting for a new wife. Gluwald's face turns even redder, as she keeps pushing the idea, forcing Hiroko to awkwardly, but desperately dodge her advances. The original clip without narration shows Hiroko's absolutely hilarious, panicked reaction as he tries to clear up the misunderstanding. Winter has once again arrived at the forest where Hiroko and the villagers live, with snow piling up everywhere. They decide to take a little break from farming and spend more time chilling inside their cozy, warm houses. During this cozy downtime, they survive by relying on the food and firewood they've stocked up on, even though the village population has grown a lot. Hiroko is actually super confused because their supplies barely seem to be going down at all. Hiroko's curiosity is finally answered when Dogger explains the situation. It turns out that even though the villagers are eating every single day, the amount they actually consume is way less than what Hiroko originally expected. Hiroko is totally shocked to find out that they are only eating about 1/3 of what they should be. This is all because the new villagers are being way too frugal. A lingering habit from their past when they were used to living in extreme poverty and scarcity. Worried that the food might go to waste, Hiroko suggests that they quickly finish off the vegetables and meat that spoil easily. Dogger totally agrees with the idea and promises to pass this important message along to the rest of the villagers right away. On the flip side, Mamu is actually feeling pretty down because she feels useless as a caretaker. The problem is that the new Daphne girls she looks after are super independent and don't need any help at all when they transform into trees for the winter. Feeling like she has absolutely no meaningful work to do, Mamu even ends up sobbing her eyes out. Luckily, Dogger quickly cheers her up by giving her a brand new task, making sure the new Daphne always wear clothes whenever they are in their human forms. Hearing that she finally has an important job to do, Mamu's spirit is instantly fired up again. Hiroko feels so relieved seeing that what started as a super emotional issue is resolved in such a peaceful way. With Mamu's situation sorted out, Hiroko heads over to the kitchen to whip up some classic winter dishes. Before long, the delicious aroma of steamed rice fills the air, drawing in a curious Ria and her friends. Seeing the massive pile of rice, Tia and Lu guess that Hiroko is about to make a mountain of onigiri, while Flora suspects it's the start of some new fermentation process. Sadly, Hiroko can only shake his head as all their guesses are completely off the mark. Hiroko finally explains that he actually plans to make mochi using a special glutinous rice. To pull this off, he has even prepared a wooden mortar and pestle to pound the freshly cooked rice. Because it looks pretty easy, Hakuran gets super interested in trying it out herself. Hiroko gives her the green light, but he makes sure to warn her to take it slow so she doesn't accidentally smash his wooden tools to pieces. Unsurprisingly, Hiroko's warning turns out to be totally justified when Hakuran starts pounding the rice with her ridiculous dragon strength. Hiroko starts getting genuinely worried when he notices something bizarre happening to their mochi dough. Sure enough, thanks to the mix of dragon strength and magic, the mochi completely hardens and turns into a literal green gemstone. They eventually try again with the help of the other villagers, but En gets way too enthusiastic and accidentally shatters the mortar anyway. The chaos just keeps going when Flora casually offers some explosives to help with the process, which Hiroko obviously rejects on the spot. But after surviving all that crazy drama, they finally manage to make some authentic, chewy mochi that is ready for everyone to enjoy. After a long wait, the mochi is finally ready to be served with a variety of delicious flavors, ranging from sweet soy sauce and classic kinako powder to vibrant greens under paste made from mashed edam. Igu and the rest of the gang can't wait to dive in and taste the perfectly chewy texture of the mochi. Meanwhile, Yuri and Frorin look like they are absolutely loving their meal, even in the middle of the freezing snowy weather. Not wanting to miss out, Lu tries some piping hot zenzai red bean soup. She is so eager that she ends up burning her tongue and frantically fans her mouth. Totally caught off guard by how hot the soup is, while relaxing, Hiroko also tastes the kusamochi made by Ria. The aroma is incredibly fresh because it uses wild forest plants, and Hiroko even thinks it tastes way better than the mugwort from his old world. However, Ria casually mentions that gathering those plants was a massive struggle because the flora actually fights back. This obviously leaves Hiroko completely baffled, while Yuri and Frorim are just busy marveling at the magic of these rice dishes. The atmosphere gets even livelier when Donovan suddenly shows up, bringing his homemade doburoku sake. The arrival of this fermented drink instantly sends everyone into a total frenzy. As soon as Hiroko takes a sip of the sake, the girls immediately swarm him, drawn in by its strong aroma, without missing a beat. The other villagers start gathering on just to get a taste of this rare brew. As a result, Lu looks incredibly satisfied after pairing the delicious sake with her mochi. Interestingly enough, mochi pounding has now become the village's trendy new winter sport whenever the weather is clear. Out of all the villagers, it turns out the absolute best mochi pounder is Gordon the Minotaur, without even using much energy. He just lets the sheer weight of his mallet drop to create the most perfect mochi texture ever. Taking off his protective helmet, Glatz introduces himself as the head of the Britoa family from the Golgol Demon Kingdom. even though his identity is crystal clear. Renana still looks super confused about how to respond to such a sudden marriage proposal. Seeing the incredibly awkward situation, Beazle finally explains to Hiroku that Glatz actually fell in love at first sight. That's the whole reason why he was reckless enough to propose even though they had literally just met. Glatz is so fired up that he immediately asks Hiroku, as the village mayor, what conditions he needs to meet to be allowed to take Renana away and make her his wife. Hiroku feels like this approach is a bit weird, but the high elves chime in, pointing out that marriages arranged by parents or superiors are totally normal in their world. Ricket even starts daydreaming about some romantic drama where Hiroku is the evil villain tearing two lovers apart. Even though Hiroku's only intention is to make sure the two of them are actually a good match. Not wanting to make any rash decisions, Hiroku firmly states that the most important thing is Renana's own feelings. He refuses to give his permission if Renana has any objections to getting married. To make things crystal clear, Hiroku strictly forbids Glatz from using any threats or abusing his authority. He then tells Renana to think it over carefully before deciding whether to accept Glatz's feelings or reject him. Eventually, the two of them try going on a walk together, so they can get to know each other a bit better. Meanwhile, Hiroku and Beazle just watch from a distance, silently wishing the best for their budding relationship. Even though they agree to start exchanging letters, Glatz is still super anxious. The poor guy is terrified that some other man might suddenly swoop in and steal Renana's heart. Without any warning, Glatz suddenly causes a massive uproar at the Demon Lord's headquarters by announcing that he wants to resign just to pursue his love. Naturally, his fellow generals are completely shocked and try to stop him, but Glatz stubbornly insists that he can just hand over his title and duties to his younger brother. The drama even influences some of the other generals, making them want to quit too, but while the chaos over there eventually cools down, the vibe back in the village remains totally peaceful as everyone enjoys their home-cooked meals. While snacking on some pickles, it suddenly hits Hiroku that the rice they are eating would be a million times better if they had some seaweed, or nori, to go with it. Unfortunately, Lou and the others just stare at him, in total confusion because they have absolutely no idea what in the world Hiroku means by the word nori. Hiroku tries his best to explain what it looks like, but the concept is so alien to them that Ria actually assumes nori is some kind of vicious sea monster that likes to entangle its prey. Since nori does come from the sea, Yuri suggests asking Gorun about it, which leads them to immediately place an order for the stuff from the city of Shishato. Sure enough, a few days later, Gorun comes to visit the village braving the freezing cold weather just to do some business with Hiroku. Bringing along a whole barrel full of wet seaweed, Gorun is honestly still a bit skeptical about whether this is really the exact thing Hiroku has been looking for. Wasting absolutely no time, Hiroku jumps right into processing it himself, finally chopping the seaweed until it's super smooth and then mixing it into clean water. He then carefully pours the mixture into a wooden frame so it can be shaped into thin sheets, getting it all prepped and ready for the drying process. The girls watching the process feel like the nori looks way more like forest moss, but Hiroku just casually keeps working away at it. Luckily, thanks to some handy magic from Tia and Flora, the soaking wet sheets of nori dry up incredibly fast without them having to wait long at all. Gorun is a bit puzzled seeing that the final product looks as stiff as paper, but Hiroku quickly shows off the secret to prepping it for eating. That's because before serving, the nori needs to be briefly roasted over some charcoal so its texture gets perfectly crispy and that amazing ocean aroma really pops out. Once he feels the nori is crispy enough, Hiroku immediately wraps a warm rice ball in the sheet, making it completely ready to be devoured. The moment they take a bite, the girls instantly fall in love with its perfectly salty flavor and how super convenient it is to just eat with their hands. Not stopping there, Hiroku also whips up some asobumochi, which instantly gets Senna and the others totally hooked thanks to that amazing combo of crispy and chewy textures. Seeing the massive business potential here, Gorun immediately offers a partnership to process the nori, as long as Hiroku is willing to share his mochi ingredients. But the second Goroon gets a bit too bold and asks about their rice alcohol stash. The girls all team up to shut him down immediately, since they consider it the village's most precious treasure. That night, Hiroku looks incredibly pumped as he fans the rice in a massive wooden tub, fully rocking a white headband tied on his forehead. Watching his dramatic performance, and gets a bit confused and asks why the rice needs to be fanned constantly. Hiroku simply replies that he's doing it all just to set the right mood. Once the vibe feels just right, Hiroku starts mixing up the vinegared rice, or sumeshi, while preparing all sorts of fillings like mushrooms, veggies, and sliced eggs. However, since the locals aren't really used to eating raw fish, Hiroku decides to make futomaki, or thick sushi rolls, without using any raw ingredients whatsoever. Armed with a special rolling mat crafted by the elves, Hiroku and the maids get super busy rolling the sushi one by one with absolute precision. As it turns out, making perfectly round rolls isn't as easy as it looks, that is, until N manages to create a unique square-shaped sushi that actually leaves Hiroku feeling super impressed. He doesn't stop there, either. Hiroku also prepares a salad roll variant using mayonnaise and real crab meat, which feels like an incredibly luxurious treat for the villagers. It looks so mouth-watering that Hiroku tries to sneak a quick taste, but N immediately scolds him, telling him it's bad manners for the host to snack while cooking. Once the dish is ready, Flora and Tia are a bit startled when they catch a whiff of the sauroma, but in the end, they totally admit that the taste is actually super delicious and unique. Rie even chows down with serious enthusiasm because she wants to get her revenge on microbes using the power of the vinegar and Hiroku's sushi. Amidst all this cozy warmth, winter is quietly coming to an end. As a result, Hiroku starts chatting with Igu to figure out the absolute best time to get back to farming. Before the craziness in the fields begins, Hiroku comes up with the idea to host a village festival to liven things up, especially since their population has grown so much lately. He tries explaining some quirky festivals to them like tomato throwing and cheese rolling races, but his explanations just leave the girls completely bewildered. Since his ideas are too hard to grasp, Hiroku ends up asking them what kind of festivals they usually celebrate. Naturally, this immediately sparks a fierce debate among the elves about the traditions from their respective homelands. Because the intense argument over Piu Piu and Mumu just isn't going anywhere, Hiroku finally decides to use a simple lottery system so that everything feels completely fair. Hiroku starts shaking his wooden lottery box and pulls out a block that says Butokai, which means they are going to host a village-wide martial arts tournament. Instantly, the girls get insanely hyped and start planning out the competition, while Hiroku can only resign himself to his fate. Even though he feels like he just drew something that sounds pretty dangerous. Spring had finally arrived in the village, but while Hiroku was happily tending to his garden, he couldn't help but notice that the villagers were acting super hyped up out of nowhere. You could totally see that fiery energy in the lizardmen, as they intensely practiced striking wooden barrels. Meanwhile, over on the field, Ria and the high elves were super busy sharpening their archery skills. Hiroku was honestly pretty baffled by this massive wave of enthusiasm, especially since everyone seemed so dead set on pushing their physical limits way beyond their usual routines. As it turns out, they were all gearing up for a huge martial arts tournament. Even Yuri stepped in, strictly training the civil servant girls just to make sure they kept their pride intact. Keeping a close eye on them, Yuri pushed the girls to keep running to build up their stamina, even though they were clearly already exhausted. Harem then explained that over in the Demon Kingdom, even government officials are required to be physically strong. That little tidbit just made the competitive vibe in the village skyrocket. This training fever was seriously contagious. It wasn't just the officials, the demon spiders and even the little kids didn't want to miss out on the hype. Out of nowhere, the spiders started moving together in perfect formations, while Senna and the other beast girls pushed themselves to do hundreds of chin-ups. On the flip side, Lasty felt her body getting a bit stiff since she hadn't had a serious fight in ages, so she decided to head back to her homeland for some hardcore training. Worried that the arena would be completely obliterated, Hiroku quickly racked his brain for a way to keep Lasty from unleashing her full power during the matches. Ultimately, Hiroku tried to smooth talk Lasty and Hakuran into being the referees instead. I mean, if those two actually fought, the entire tournament arena would be wiped off the map in a split second. Throwing in a bit of flattery, Hiroku convinced them that such a crucial referee position could only be handled by absolute powerhouses like the two of them. Thanks to that killer praise, Hiroku successfully got the Dragons to oversee the matches rather than totally wrecking the arena as participants. Meanwhile, Lou and Tia looked super chill drinking tea together. But beneath that calm surface, they were actually throwing some seriously sharp jabs at each other. It was so obvious that these two couldn't wait to clash and prove once and for all who the top dog would be in the upcoming martial arts tournament. Flora, on the other hand, chose to join the medical team to heal any injured fighters, all while peacefully taking care of her baby. She even gave a quick reminder that her explosion magic is a lethal weapon that absolutely shouldn't be used carelessly on others, no matter the reason. With all the participants' prep work done, Hiroku got busy designing the arena layout, complete with a main stage and rows of spectator seats. Basically, Hiroku wanted this tournament to feel like a massive festival that everyone could enjoy. So, he even set up a special area for food stalls around the arena. A whole feast of party food was carefully prepared, ranging from mouth-watering grilled corn to delicious tacos, just to spoil the attendees. The highly anticipated day of the tournament finally arrived. Banners were neatly hung, and the village atmosphere turned incredibly festive with the arrival of so many invited guests. The crowd started packing into the freshly built wooden bleachers, patiently waiting for the much-awaited opening match to kick off. Amidst the bustling crowd, Yuri showed up to introduce her father, Golgard. Hiroku was completely blown away when he realized the guy was actually the Demon King of the Demon Kingdom. At first, Hiroku was super nervous, but he quickly realized that Golgard was actually really laid back and nowhere near as stiff as he had imagined. The surprises didn't stop there, because shortly after, Hakuran's father, Duz, made his entrance. Hiroku was even more shell-shocked to realize his guests were literal legendary figures. He honestly never expected that his little village tournament would be attended in person by the absolute rulers and the strongest dragons in the world. Things got a bit tense when Duz and Golgard faced off, making the Demon King look just a tiny bit nervous in front of the Dragon Emperor. Despite the brief awkwardness, their attention was quickly drawn to the center of the arena as the tournament's opening ceremony was finally about to begin. At last, Harem officially kicked off the first Great Tree Village martial arts tournament, which was instantly met with roaring cheers from the hyped-up crowd. Great Tree Village suddenly erupted into a lively uproar as all the residents gathered to witness the massive event they had been waiting for. It made total sense for the vibe to be so electric, considering this was the biggest event ever held in the village. While waiting for things to start, Hiroku was seen chilling on the stage with Harem by his side. Once everything was set, Hiroku got up from his seat to give a quick welcome speech to officially open the festivities. Gripping a golden megaphone, Hiroku reminded the participants to stay safe and avoid any serious injuries. Hearing that, the villagers just cheered even louder with pure excitement. The tournament itself was split into several categories, starting with an opening bracket that absolutely anyone could join. This category was the general division, and the rules were pretty simple. A one-on-one duel where the winner is decided by a ring out or by snatching the opponent's headband. Now, the first round of participants started stepping into the arena, totally ready to show off the results of all their hard training. It didn't take long for the referee to give the signal, kicking off the opening match between Rosalind and Mamu. Over on the sidelines, Hiroku watched the duel super closely because he was dying to see how much his village's strength had grown. But unexpectedly, the fight between Rosalind and Mamu was so intense that it totally shocked Hiroku. He honestly thought they were just going to casually swing wooden sticks at each other. Even though it was just the general division, these two fighters showed off some incredible techniques and kept exchanging blows non-stop. Mamu kept pushing forward aggressively, but Rosalind cleverly deflected an aerial attack and ultimately took the win after Mamu's headband flew off. Seeing how exhausting and intense the match was, the medical team immediately sprang into action to help out. Rosalind, who collapsed from pure exhaustion, was instantly treated by Lou, meanwhile, and grabbed the megaphone to warn the fighters not to do anything crazy like ripping off their opponent's limbs during a match. Once things calmed down a bit, the tournament moved on to the next round, featuring a whole lineup of participants from various races. One of the highlights was Lassa trying to use fire magic against Donovan, but the old dwarf didn't even flinch and ended up scoring a crushing victory. The dwarf's physical toughness wasn't really surprising, though, since Hiroko already knew they had once recklessly charged through a monster-infested forest just to hunt for some booze. And it wasn't just the dwarves. The tournament got even livelier with the centaurs stepping up to represent their race. Gruwald the centaur successfully won her match, although there was a hilarious moment where she sprinted way too fast and almost ran straight out of bounds. But beyond all the hardcore physical brawls, there were also some truly unique duels that totally entertained the crowd. For instance, there was a duel between a literal tree and a purple slime. Fascinatingly, the tree even had a flower growing on top of it, creating a seriously bizarre tournament spectacle. After a long string of preliminary rounds, the moment everyone was waiting for finally arrived, the grand finals of the general division. In this final clash, Flora, relying on a mix of swordplay and magic, had to face off against Senna, who stepped up barehanded but overflowing with confidence. The moment it started, the two finalists went totally all out, fighting aggressively to claim that #1 champion title. The epic clash of their powers had all the villagers and kids screaming in excitement, while Hiroku himself couldn't believe they were taking it this seriously. The two of them kept locking horns, doing absolutely everything in their power to throw each other out of the ring. At the climax, Senna managed to grab Flora, but they ended up tumbling and falling out of the arena at the exact same time, so the referee declared the match a draw. Seeing that result, Hiroku felt incredibly satisfied and quickly got ready to hand out the awards to the top fighters. Once the general division officially wrapped up, Hiroku awarded silver medals to the winners, which was instantly met with a massive round of applause from the whole crowd. However, during the intermission between rounds, there was a pretty hilarious chat going on among the staff members. While setting up for the Warrior tournament, the staff joked around, thinking Hiroku was going to appear as some secret boss character, which Hiroku instantly shut down on the spot. After the jokes died down, the tension ramped right back up as the tournament moved into a much more challenging category. Now, the Warrior tournament officially began with 0 weapon restrictions. The first match pitted Ano the Inferno Wolf against Junior from the Lamia race. The duel quickly kicked off, bringing Junior and Ano face to face in the middle of a totally fired up arena. Watching them get ready, Hiroku suddenly remembered the dark history of how the Inferno Wolves nearly wiped out Junior's entire race in the past. Because of that, a wave of guilt washed over Hiroku as he watched the two races with such a bitter past face off against each other. Shortly after, and gave the signal, and the fierce battle inside the arena officially began. Right out of the gate, Junior looked incredibly agile, launching aggressive attacks using both her spear and her tail. Her lightning-fast movements were so slick that they left Hiroku and the rest of the audience completely in awe. Original footage without narration, as Ano howls loudly and unleashes a purple aura. The sudden appearance of a giant wolf shadow behind Ano instantly triggered Junior's trauma, terrifying her so much that she ended up forfeiting. Since Junior abruptly threw in the towel, Ano walked away as the winner of this round. After the match, Hiroku and Mamu had a little chat about just how terrifying the power of a rampaging Inferno Wolf truly is. Moving on to the next round, it was time for Dogger the Lizardman to go head-to-head against Makura. Funnily enough, Hiroku recalled the moment he named the little spider Makura, simply because she was round and fluffy like a pillow. Makura herself seemed super happy and felt that the name Hiroku gave her was an absolutely perfect fit. Back in the arena, Dogger kept up a relentless assault with his wooden sword, but Makura dodged every swing with insane agility. But then, out of nowhere, Makura managed to trap and completely lock down Dagger's movements, using her white silk threads. As a result, Makura snagged the win after successfully restraining Dogger right in the middle of the arena. And announcing Makura's victory seriously left Hiroku amazed at just how strong the little spider really was. Not long after, the crowd erupted into cheers again to welcome the third round between Gulf and Ya. The second the match started, Gulf charged straight in, relentlessly attacking Ya to find an opening. On the flip side, Ya was forced to defend with all her might using her massive, heavy-looking stone hammer. Ya even tried throwing out some magic that triggered a huge explosion, but Gulf stayed completely cool and unfazed. Since her final attack missed and Ya was completely out of gas, Gulf easily took the win for this round. Going into the fourth round, Harem announced a rule change since one of the participants actually had the ability to fly. This time, Gran Maria was going head-to-head against Ria, in an epic aerial duel right above the arena. The two of them had a quick chat about the weapons they were going to use before getting totally serious about the fight. Moments later, Ria opened the fight by firing off 3 incredibly fast green magic arrows. Gran Maria nimbly deflected all the arrows before shooting high up into the sky to create some distance. From way up there, she had a crystal clear view of Ria's position, setting her up to launch a devastating counterattack. The two of them then clashed so violently mid-air that it kicked up a massive dust explosion, completely blanketing the arena. Amidst the chaos, Ria managed to knock Gran Maria down and pin her, demanding that she surrender immediately. But Gran Maria refused to give up, and instead used her raw strength to totally turn the tables on her. Feeling cornered, Ria made a desperate move, unleashing her final lightning magic that zapped the entire battleground. Instantly, the arena was swallowed by thick smoke, revealing the two of them collapsed and completely exhausted on the ground. Watching that dramatic finish from the stands left Hiroku wondering if the match was going to end in a tie. Moving into the fifth round, the tournament's tension skyrocketed when Tia managed to take down Kudal in just a matter of seconds. Not wanting to be outdone, Lu stepped up right after and showed absolute dominance, defeating Karuni in the blink of an eye. After those lightning-fast matches, the arena cooled down a bit as the defeated participants gathered to take a well-deserved breather. The cool part was that even though they were just beating each other up in the ring, they all looked super chummy and relaxed together. Over on the other side of the stands, Harem was already locked and loaded with a special gadget to record every single detail of her older sister's upcoming match. However, Hiroku got a little distracted when he noticed the medical staff casually chilling and enjoying the show like they didn't have a care in the world. Finally, the most anticipated moment arrived, a high-level duel between the two absolute powerhouses, Tia and Lu. Before the storm of attacks actually began, the two of them exchanged a meaningful smile, as a sign of mutual respect. The moment the signal was given, their first clash triggered a massive explosion of light that completely blinded everyone in the arena. Their movements were so insanely fast that Hiroku and the rest of the crowd were totally overwhelmed just trying to keep up with the fight. Unable to stand just watching blurry shadows, Hiroku decided to tap into the power of his silver spear to get a clearer view. Thanks to that tool, he could finally witness for himself just how terrifyingly intense their battle in the center of the arena really was. The battle then took to the skies, where Tia started using her wings to dodge and glide around with incredible agility. But Lu wasn't about to let her off easy. She kept bombarding her rival with a barrage of lasers and massive-scale magic. After getting their fill of long-range magic clashes, the two of them took it to the ground for a straight-up fistfight that looked straight out of a shonen manga. Weirdly enough, their bond of friendship seemed to grow even stronger after beating the absolute crap out of each other like this. This brutal brawl was ultimately won by Tia, though Lu looked seriously salty about the final result. Feeling her pride sting from losing to her rival, Lu immediately went to pout and vent her frustrations to Hiroku. The surprises didn't stop there, because in the grand finals, Tia actually got completely crushed by Makura the Spider due to a bad matchup of abilities. For that flawless victory, Hiroku awarded a golden crown to Makura, crowning her the true champion of the tournament. Seeing that outcome, Dogger and the other fighters could only sigh and admit that the Spider's strength was just on a whole other level. Even though the main tournament was over, Hiroku actually had one last surprise up his sleeve, an exhibition match. This time, it was an Andlasti's turn to step into the arena and show off their true power to everyone. Who would have thought? Their clash ended up being so insanely destructive that it triggered a massive energy explosion. Rumor has it that the blast was so huge, you could clearly see it all the way from the Demon Kingdom. Right in the middle of the completely wrecked arena, Donovan and Rio were just chilling and enjoying some beer among the rubble. Witnessing the utter devastation, Hirako started scolding the fighters for going way overboard. But then Hirako quickly realized that he was the one who gave them permission, so he could only sigh in defeat at his totally leveled arena. In total contrast to him, the officials in the stands were laughing in pure satisfaction at the wild spectacle that had just unfolded before them. Even though the arena was now flattened to the ground, Hiraku considered the festival a massive success since everyone looked so happy. Hiraku's out in the field doing what he does best, and today's prize is a massive white daikon radish he just yanked clean out of the ground. Turns out Hiraku forgot to warn his companion about the spicy end of the radish. A diagram even appeared to explain it. The tip is sharp, the top is sweet. Classic farmer knowledge. Delivered a bit too late. Before they could plan out the pickling, a group of beastkin kids came sprinting across the field shouting that some weird people had shown up near the village shrine. Weird was an understatement. One of the visitors introduced himself as Valgrife, progenitor of the vampires himself, casually chatting like bumping into the village mayor was no big deal. Inside the lodge, Valgrife sat across the table holding baby Alfred like an old family friend. Lou was there too, explaining Hiraku's role as the village chief while Valgrife caught up on lost time. That's when the real surprise landed. The woman with Valgrife turned out to be Fush, the Grand Priestess of the Koran faith. Apparently she's important enough that entire parades get held just to celebrate her arrival. And all that status didn't stop her from bowing her head and making one quiet, desperate request, please save her son's life. Flora was already on it. She examined the diagnosis Crystal Fush brought, and called it a combination of the most complicated illnesses she'd ever seen, even for the greatest healer around. This wasn't going to be easy, but Flora and Lou looked at each other and made the call. They weren't turning these people away. They locked themselves in the lab and got to work. The ingredient list was something else. Tia flew to a snowy mountain peak for the holy drop flower, and for the dragon's tear, Lou simply started tickling her Kuran until she laughed so hard she cried. The high elves came back from the forest in absolutely rough shape. The wandering mushroom they had to track down was apparently far more powerful than any of the stories made it sound. Lee dropped to her knees the moment they arrived. Every ingredient gathered. All that was left was a rare potted plant that a merchant named Michael had procured. Flora and Lou handled it carefully, and knowing just how dangerous this specific herb could be, Hiraku just grabbed the root and pulled. No hesitation. A wall of purple gas immediately exploded out of it, strong enough to send even Kuro, the giant black wolf, bolting full speed in the opposite direction. Flora calmly noted it was completely harmless. Everyone still needed a bath. While Flora and Lou ran experiments, so intense that actual fire was shooting out of the chimney, Fush hadn't moved from the shrine outside praying from sunrise to sundown, every single day. Flora handed the vial straight to Fush and skipped the formalities. Just give it to your son immediately. And it worked. Fush's gratitude was almost overwhelming. Though Flora wasn't having any of the ceremony. As the portal opened and the group prepared to leave, Golgod casually mentioned they'd be back within 10 years or so. Hiraku's response was diplomatic. Valgrife, meanwhile, had completely lost track of what a decade even feels like. The light didn't dim through the night, which meant Zabuton's whole family couldn't sleep. Hiraku felt a little guilty about it, but the shrine doors got closed except during prayer time. Practical solution. A while later, Senna and Roaju were walking through the orchard talking about how you can actually cook apples. Apparently it makes them softer and less tart. Meanwhile, a mysterious tree in the experimental plot had been sitting there unidentified. Hiraku had completely forgotten what he planted in that section. A flashback filled in the answer back in his early days. He'd farmed everything he could imagine using his divine tool. No seeds needed, no instructions, just think it and grow it. One by one the mystery crops got identified, walnuts, then almonds, with Tia casually cracking open shells bare-handed while Roaju pulverized another part clean. Everything got logged on the clipboard, and then Hiraku remembered why he planted all of it. He'd been craving a handful of mixed nuts. He also realized that if he'd been thinking about beer at the same time, that entire field would be a wheat farm right now. Cashews, roasted over a fire, they came out fragrant and genuinely delicious. Two of the women immediately noted these would fly off shelves in the Demon Kingdom. Hiraku had accidentally grown a future trade commodity. And then there's the wine slime story. One of the village's water-purifying slimes tumbled into a wine barrel one day, absorbed the whole thing, and permanently became something different. New experiment day. Hiraku wanted to test a parachute basket system. Tia volunteered to fly up and release it from altitude while the others watched from the ground. The test run didn't exactly go smoothly. The basket came down hard, left a crater in the field. And Hiraku and Tia stood over it looking at each other with the energy of people who had just broken something expensive. A purple slime that had wandered over apparently found the whole thing fascinating. It climbed into the basket on Tia's next run, and on the way back down, jumped out completely on its own. The slime hit the ground, reformed instantly, and looked completely fine. Then it started bouncing away down the road, hopped the fence, and disappeared into the forest. Apparently that counts as a hobby now. Scene shift over at the mountain elf workshop. Yo was working away while her assistant Hiterto hovered nearby with a clipboard. The kind of person who always has notes and opinions about the angle of things. Two elven visitors showed up at the village gates. Hiraku welcomed them the usual way: food first, talk later. By the time they were sitting down together, the mood was already relaxed. Ya in particular warmed up fast. She stood up mid-conversation, raised her mug, and started talking enthusiastically about everything her village hunts rabbits. Boars, getting more confident with every sentence. Later, Hiterto pulled Ya aside for a private word. The message was clear. If you want a place here, you need to make a real impression on the village chief. Ya took that completely literally. Day 1 small boulder, Day 2 medium boulder. By day 99, she was lifting rocks larger than most buildings without breaking a sweat. When Hiraku finally witnessed what Ya had been doing, he just dropped to the ground, flat out. Ya stood there confused, holding the boulder, while Hiterto pressed a hand to her forehead and said nothing. But Hiterto wasn't done. The training program kept escalating, hanging upside down, endless sit-ups, increasingly bizarre drills that seemed to have no clear endpoint, until Ya stood up, flexed both arms, and looked genuinely proud of herself. Hiterto stared at the result with an expression somewhere between respect and deeply questioning her own decisions. And that was that.